Ellen, I believe you're muted.
Naomi, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's joined today. We appreciate that you're making the time for this because, of course, we're interested in finding out what is going on with families during the COVID-19 crisis. We know there's been a lot of hardship, and one of the many insights that we're getting are coming from survey research. Some are coming through individual interviews with customers, people who are experiencing hunger and poverty, but so much information is also coming from the monthly surveys that Propel has been conducting since March of 2020. Propel has an app that's used by millions of SNAP customers to check their balances, see what's happening with their benefits and other features. And the regular monthly surveys of a sample of those customers are providing insights into what the experiences are, not only with their accessing SNAP and the degree to which SNAP benefits have been helping them or are not sufficient. And that's fluctuated, of course, in recent months, but also what challenges they have in dealing with other debt, with housing, other basic needs. And very pleased today that we're joined by Julieta Cuellar from Propel. She's going to tell us a little bit about some new features of their app and a little bit of a branding change. But most of what she's going to share with us are the results of a survey in June of about 5,000 of their customers. And especially given that this week is a big week for the child tax credit, she's going to share some additional insights that the survey has provided in terms of how families are positioned to get that child tax credit, what they may already know, what they may, where there may be gaps in educating them about how to go about claiming that child tax credit. We know that it is top of mind for so many of us in the community to make sure that we maximize the use of that tax credit, which can do so much to cut child poverty. So Julieta, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Ellen. Next slide, please. So I'm coming to you from Propel, and we're a company that builds modern, respectful, effective technology that helps Americans with limited income improve their financial health. And we've been around for several years now, and you know our tool, our application as FreshEBT, but this month we're actually transitioning to be called Providers and to offer additional functionality to our users. Next slide, please. So Providers builds on the core tool that we provide. We've provided our millions of users for several years now, which is EBT balance checking. And the other features that we offer, such as opportunities for users to save via coupons, to find employment via job postings, and also to stay up to date on benefits program changes through our benefits hub. And add to that the ability to see debit or like a banking feature side by side with government benefits. And we're the only application to offer that. And this builds from years of learning from our users and understanding that there are multiple parts to a household's budget that helps them get through the month. It's not just SNAP, it's not just employment, but cash coming in from other sources. And obviously, as the child tax credit advance payments begin this month, we're really seeing how important being able to manage cash benefits alongside government benefits is just very important. Next slide, please. So just to get everybody on the same page, here's just a brief overview of who Providers users are today. We have over 5 million users on Providers in any given month, 2 million users on any given day. And we're available in all US states and territories. That means that we have about 1 in 4 households that receive SNAP on the platform. And we have a disproportionately high portion of users that are women and that have children under 18. Next slide, please. So as Ellen said in the introduction, these monthly webinars, I share what we've learned in the household pulse survey that we've been doing every month for over a year now. But I'm also going to, towards the end, bring in some additional findings from other surveys, from other research we've been doing. So in terms of the household pulse survey, it's about 10 minutes. We ask people multiple choice questions as well as open response questions on food insecurity, housing insecurity, employment, etc. We have a random sample of users. It's a bit of a higher sample this month. Over 8,000 people responded to the survey, and it's done in the first 2 weeks of the month. So in this case, June. Next slide, please. So here are the main top line findings that I'm going to highlight today. First, that we are seeing an uptick in users that saying that they're paying their rent late, and that we also have new insight into just how many people owe back rent or mortgage payments. And unfortunately, it's quite high, that proportion. Relatedly, we also have seen borrowing to cover expenses in the past 30 days jump up quite a bit from lower levels in April and May. In addition, looking across a number of measures of financial instability, material hardship, and housing instability, we see Black providers users experiencing much more hardship. And finally, we've asked new questions related to mental health in the June survey, and are going to present some more on that. Next slide, please. So more users paid rent late in June, and we now know that a majority of users who do pay rent owe back rent. So only 45% of users said they paid rent on time, and this is only over 2 percentage points down from April and May levels, as I mentioned before. We also now know that among users who pay rent or mortgage, and the majority of them are renters, 60% owe some back rent or mortgage payments, and almost 20% of those owe $1,000 or more. So these are not small amounts of debt that people have. I'll let you read here in the words of one of our users talking about the challenges that they face in not having stable housing and the way that it affects mental health. Next slide, please. So moving on to sort of borrowing and using credit for everyday expenses. 56% of our users, sorry, this should say providers users. I'm making the transition as well. 56% of providers users report borrowing or using credit to cover expenses in the last 30 days. And you can see on the chart here on the right that that's quite a big increase from the past couple of months, and it's reaching almost the levels that we haven't seen since January of this year. You know, an astounding 73% of people say that they owe on their utilities or other bills. This is just cumulatively speaking. And 61% owe $500 or more, so it's not small amounts. People also owe family and friends quite a bit. And relatedly, 46% of our users say that they have less than $25 on hand, which is up, again, quite a bit since last month. Next slide, please. And in these two quotes from users, you can see sort of how people put together different sources of help to get by, and just how difficult it is to sort of escape this cascade of borrowing. Next slide, please. And so looking at racial disparities, and this is something that we see, you know, unfortunately, month to month, but it was quite stark this month, the way in which across just a number of measures, Black providers users have seen higher levels of hardship. So Black respondents to the survey were less likely to have paid June rent on time, only 36%, right, compared to 45% of white respondents, were likely to express uncertainty about remaining in their current housing for the next 30 days. 14% said they would not be able to, or probably would not be able to stay in their current housing, compared to only 9% of white respondents. They were more likely to owe on their utilities or other bills, and a really astounding 79% said they owed on those bills, compared to an also quite high percentage of white respondents. Next slide. They were also more likely to have decided to not pay a bill in the past 30 days, more likely to have borrowed or used credit to cover expenses in the last 30 days, more likely to think that the money they had on hand would last them only 1 to 2 days. That's almost 50%. And more likely to not have most things that they need at home. Next slide, please. And finally, moving on to some new information we have related to mental health. For the first time, we used a mental health screening tool called the Patient Health Questionnaire 4. So it's 4 questions to assess anxiety and depression. So the question is, in the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by the following problems? And then 2 of the options relate to depression, 2 relate to anxiety. And a quarter of users experienced symptoms of anxiety and depression nearly every day in the previous 2 weeks, which is quite astounding, but not surprising. It's something that we've seen come through in the open-ended responses of our surveys, for over a year. But it's stark when we look at it in this more with this more defined tool. Next slide, please. And here are just a couple of quotes from our users from the survey, alluding to the difficulties that they face day to day and how that takes a mental toll. Next slide, please. So moving on to the child tax credit. As Ellen said in the beginning, it's arriving this week. The 15th is the first payment going out. Next slide, please. So we've been trying to track awareness and anticipate issues that people might have with access. And this is just from a couple of surveys that we've done the last just week or two. What we know is that awareness is high, which is a good sign, right? Almost 90% of people with children under 18 have heard of the expanded child tax credit and changes to it. However, when it comes to getting the payment, that's where we see some drop off in terms of certainty or knowledge. 58% of people think that they're going to get that first payment in July. Only 39% know how much they'll be receiving, and almost a quarter of people, 23%, are not sure where they're going to be receiving that first payment. If they're going to be getting it in the mail, if they're going to be getting it in their bank account, on the card they got from their tax preparer. There's a fair bit of uncertainty there. Next slide, please. The great thing is that in June, the IRS launched, so just last month, 2 online tools to help people access the child tax credit advance payments. One is this portal or this tool for people who are non-filers, people who have not filed taxes, to sign up and start getting those payments. And the other is an update portal so that people can, see how they're going to be receiving the payments, change that if they would like to, opt out of the monthly payments, and just, get the tax credit in a lump sum next year when they file taxes. And, we are seeing that users are facing some barriers, at least at this stage, to using those tools to manage payments or access them. Only 20% of users surveyed have tried one of the tools. 82% of users access the CTC sign-up tool, that non-filer tool, on a smartphone, which, and unfortunately, that tool isn't mobile friendly. And 28% of users who tried to access the update portal were not able to log on, because there's quite a rigorous identity verification and log on issue with the portal, which in talking to users makes sense to them. They do feel secure as a result of having to go through these steps, but it's also been an issue for people accessing the portal. Next slide, please. We also asked people how they were feeling about these upcoming payments, trying to get a sense of get a pulse of where people were. A lot of people are ready to receive it, but then we see confusion, worry, just skepticism about whether this is really going to happen, and also just a nervousness around having taken the steps to get it. Here are just a few quotes from people. So we asked them this question, how are you feeling? And then we asked them like, why is that, or explain that more. So I think people are feeling pretty confused. Maybe a sense of it's too good to be true, or maybe there's a catch in terms of having to pay it back. And also maybe some skepticism born from, people's experience accessing any benefits and just how difficult that's been historically. Next slide, please. I think there's a great push among organizations, I'm sure, where some of the participants here today come from, to get the word out and try to get people to access these tools, get them to sign up if they haven't filed taxes. And we're doing this across a number of places on the Providers app. We have this benefits hub, which we've had for, I guess, almost a year now, where we share important updates to government benefits programs. And we've been sharing information about the child tax credit for some time, including, payment dates, a calculator, so that people can estimate how much they'll receive. There are also other sort of notifications that we're using, as you can see here, and I'm directing people to sign up if they need to, or to update their information directly from the app. Next slide, please. We also created an external facing website, childtaxcredit.com. We launched that last month, and we include there the calculator and an extensive FAQ that directs people to government websites and is built on what we know. We've been surveying users for a couple months about the child tax credit. What we know are questions that people have, and trying to put them in the most sort of straightforward language. And we're going to keep adding to this website as time goes on. So please check it out, and please share it with people. Next slide, please. And then looking ahead, the research doesn't stop, when the first payment goes out. We really want to stay on top of finding out or sort of assessing how many people have received the payment. So we're hoping to use just a quick survey in our app, as you can kind of see here, to ask people on the day after the payment if they received it, trying to get a sense of how many people got it by direct deposit. And then also we're partnering with Poverty Solutions out of the University of Michigan to basically use our household survey that we've been doing every month, what I presented the results on earlier in this presentation. Partnering with them to use that survey to do a pre-post study on the impact of the child tax credit. So we've integrated new questions at the request of researchers and are sharing the data from these surveys, and so that they can do a rigorous academic study of the impact that the child tax credit has. So we'll be continuing to survey households for the remainder of the advanced payments and through early next year to get an assessment of how things change over time. And in addition to that, we are internally as Propel conducting a longitudinal study, qualitative study with, I think it's going to be about 12 of our users, 10 to 12 of our users, which we've recruited and have done baseline interviews with, and then we'll actually survey and interview once a month for the next 7 months to find out more about their experience receiving the child tax credit payments, not receiving them, how they're using them, how it perhaps changes, different aspects of their lives. And we really look forward to sharing those learnings with you in the months ahead. Next slide, please. Thank you. And you can check out these monthly insights as well as previous ones at joinpropel.com/learn and see more about the new providers app at joinproviders.com. And my email if you have any further questions, although I think I'm going to take questions now. Thank you.
Julieta, thank you so much for that. And this is a big week, both with your app changing, but also the payments finally coming, the child tax credit. And that is probably the biggest takeaway from today's findings that you've shared with us. For people who haven't seen it, some of the Propel information with respect to the child tax credit and helping inform the rollout of that is cited in today's New York Times article on the child tax credit. And it seems to me that the insights that were quoted in that article were mainly two things. One, again, repeating what you've shared with us, Julieta, what is the temperature out there? Are people ready for the tax credit or not? And it sounded like both from the percentages you report and from your colleague Stacy Taylor's comment to Jason DeParle that it's a mixed bag out there. Some people are really, really ready to get it and set to go. And for a lot of others, there's a mixture of worry and not sure what their next step is. But I also saw the insight that Jason quoted Stacy providing, which is that your insights and survey information are helping confirm that as the child tax credit is branded, if you will, as being about children, that more of the responses you were getting in terms of how the benefits were being spent had to do specifically to things that were related to kids, school clothes, school supplies, a toddler bed. And Stacy made the comment that it suggested, as some other researchers have suggested, that the framing of a benefit matters also. So it was interesting, I guess, to see how that was shared. Can you answer a question? I think you've covered this before, but we have a question about whether or not there's any charge for the app. And of course, as the app is changing, is that still true that there's no charge for using the app?
Yes, that's correct. The providers app, like the FreshEBT app before it, is free for anyone to use, and the new debit card product offered within it is also without fees.
Okay, and we're always struck. It's one of the things that's most unfortunate about the findings from COVID-19, the stark racial disparities that not only existed prior to COVID-19, but have been exacerbated during this crisis. And so you shared some of those with us today. But we also had a question from someone about whether or not you have a racial breakdown on the users of the app. So if you were thinking about your 5 million customers, or maybe it's better to think about the sample size, do you have a sense of what the demographic breakdown would be of your customers?
Sure. I'm going to pull that up right now. We do what we call a general demographic survey every about 6 months. We get sort of a larger sample of users and ask them a variety of questions to kind of get a sense of who the user base is. And also, it does change over time. And we ask questions about race and ethnicity there. So I can tell you in just a moment. I'm getting to, so 40, I'm rounding here, but 47% of the user base identifies as white or Caucasian, 34% identifies as Black or African American, 14% as Hispanic or Latino, and the numbers get quite smaller from there. 3.7% of people identify as Native American or Alaska Native, 1.5% as Asian, and 1% as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. So that's the racial breakdown of our user base. But yeah, and I would also like to direct people, if they're interested in reading more about sort of the racial disparities we've seen over time in these surveys, at this web site below, joinpropel.com/learn. We have these in-depth reports that focus on particular subjects. And there is one that looks at racial disparities through the pandemic. And so that highlights, I would say, consistent trends that we saw throughout the pandemic. This, of course, is like a snapshot in time, and where we saw like statistically significant differences across race.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Julieta, in terms of the new website that you've launched on the child tax credit, childtaxcredit.com, is that something that people could access from your app, or they just go on separately to the website to get that, or is it available both places?
I would say that we view childtaxcredit.com as something that's sort of an external facing website in which, we're trying to help people beyond the user base learn about the child tax credit and sign up for it. Although some of the same tools are available to users within the app. So the same calculator that exists on the website, people can see through the benefits hub. But I guess they're sort of distinct methods of outreach, although they share the same information, of course.
Yep, no, that's great. And I assume because the child tax credit rollout goes on for some period of time, we obviously want to see it get off to a strong start. But in addition to the tracking that you shared with us in terms of tracking receipt and impact, do you feel that you'll be learning things in your survey or from looking at use of the app or the visits to the website that will give you insights into how the community might adjust our outreach and application assistance and things like that to better increase the take-up rate of the child tax credit as it moves along?
Yeah, I think we definitely hope to have those sorts of insights to share. Yeah, I think that what we're going to be able to learn through both the monthly survey, the qualitative interviews that we're doing, and sort of this pretty broad pulse to see who's gotten the payment on the 16th. I think we're hoping to pinpoint what are some of the particular barriers that people are facing, right? All the research we've been doing up to this point is trying to estimate, how many people have filed taxes, those who haven't filed, why not? Like, what do they need? Does the non-filer tool work for them or not? And I think it's not just us, a lot of people have done a lot of work to try to identify and get ahead of potential issues. But now that the payments start to go out, I think we'll be able to pinpoint much more specifically barriers and what we might do to address them. And I think it's definitely something that we can't do alone. And so we look forward to continuing to share information through outlets like this, but also through various coalitions and partnerships. And we also just launched a research newsletter that goes out on about a monthly basis that summarizes sort of the insights that I shared in this presentation and any other sort of research we've done. So if people would like to be added to that or receive that, you can email me at the email on this slide.
Thanks, Julieta. That's great. And I know we're coming on time, but I have one last question for you because it's very top of mind for our folks around the country that there could be variation on the child tax credit take-up rate depending on what state they're in. It's not really a state matter, but we know there can be variation. Will you be getting a sense of that through your survey? I know there's an issue with sample sizes, but that sometimes you do some intensive state-specific surveys. What, if any, information might we look forward to in coming weeks?
Yeah, we do have the ability to know, we know people's location, and we also ask it, in the surveys that we do. I mean, there is, like you say, the barrier of where we have users. We're available in every state and territory, but we do tend to have more users concentrated in certain states. But it's a good point, and we welcome any partners or people doing specific work in a specific state and trying to give them information that might be useful.
Great. No, Julieta, thank you so much. And it seems to me that there's somewhat of an open invitation for people if they are spotting issues that people need information on, that perhaps you're an outlet that could work with us to get whatever questions answered as you build out your FAQs and other things. So again, I know we're at time, but thank you so much for the work that you and your colleagues are doing. And I think I'll turn it over to Nomi to close us out.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Julieta, for such a phenomenal presentation. This webinar, as mentioned at the beginning, will be uploaded to the FRAC YouTube channel, and feel free to reach out to FRAC or to Julieta if you have any more questions. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.